Dad asked, "When are you gonna start your own family?" I looked up from my plate and said, "Aren't you supposed to be mine?" Mom added, "Kids your age are building futures, not sleeping in childhood bedrooms." So I raised my glass to my future family, one that doesn't shame each other over dinner. And I left my house keys on the table, and then I did. I'm 28M, single, no kids, decent job, IT support at a hospital, and until recently, I was living at home again. Before you roll your eyes, let me explain. Back in 2020, when COVID hit full force, my lease was up, the hospital froze raises, and my parents were struggling. My dad, Richard, 61M, got laid off from his corporate consulting gig, and my mom, Susan, 58F, was recovering from surgery and couldn't be left alone. She's diabetic, had just had a foot procedure, and the house was kind of falling apart. So I moved back in. Temporarily. That was supposed to be the key word, temporary. But the months dragged on. And when I offered to pitch in with bills, I didn't realize I'd basically become their unofficial third parent. I paid for groceries, helped cover utilities, even made several of their mortgage payments when they were in default. I didn't complain. They needed help, and I had a decent emergency fund. My sister, Brooke, 30F, wasn't around much. She lives about an hour away with her boyfriend in a high-rise condo, posts pictures of sushi dinners and new handbags, and only really visits when there's something in it for her. It was fine. I kept to myself. I worked remote. Cooked. Cleaned. Quiet. Predictable. Until a few weeks ago. We were having dinner, one of those rare nights where Brooke actually showed up and Dad opened a bottle of wine like we were playing house again. The mood was weird. Everyone was overly polite, the food was too dressed up, and Brooke kept checking her phone between sips of rose. And then my dad put his fork down, looked straight at me, and asked, "So, when are you gonna start your own family?" I looked up from my plate. I wasn't even hungry. I'd been thinking about moving out for months, honestly. But I just said, "Aren't you supposed to be mine?" Silence. Mom didn't look up, just kept slicing her steak like she didn't hear a thing. And then he added, "Kids your age are building futures, not sleeping in childhood bedrooms." That hit harder than I expected. Because the truth is, I wasn't staying there out of laziness. I was holding the whole thing together, bills, groceries, their damn plumbing issue that I paid $1,200 to fix last fall. So I didn't yell, didn't argue. I just raised my glass. To my future family, one that doesn't shame each other over dinner. I placed my house key right in the middle of the table. Got up. And walked out. I thought that was the end of it. I had no idea that dinner would be the last time I ever spoke to them the same way again. After that dinner, I stayed with a friend for a couple of days. Just until I could get something short-term. I didn't pack much when I left. Just my laptop, a change of clothes, and my dignity, I guess. I ended up finding a small studio on the edge of town. It wasn't much. The sink leaked a bit and the walls were thin, but it was mine. No passive-aggressive sighs from the hallway. No lectures about real adulthood. No reminders that I was overstaying a welcome I was actually paying for. The first few days felt like freedom. I didn't tell anyone where I was, not even Brooke. I needed the distance. I worked my shifts remotely, made pasta in a scratched-up pot I found at Goodwill, and just let the silence soak in. Then the texts started coming. At first, they were soft. Polite. "Hey, your room's still the same, just in case you want to talk. Dinner's quieter without you. Let us know you're okay." I didn't respond. Not because I wanted to punish them. I just didn't know what I'd even say. That I was tired of being invisible? That I'd rather eat frozen lasagna in peace than sit through another dinner where I was both ignored and expected to hold the roof up? Then came the shift. Less concern. More guilt. "You know, we took you in when you had nowhere else to go. It would have been nice if you said thank you before walking out like that. Don't forget who paid for your schooling." Except they didn't. I took out loans. I worked part-time all through college. They helped me get started, sure, but after my second year, it was all me. I even paid off part of their debt during the pandemic. Quietly. No ceremony. Just trying to keep us all afloat. I started blocking numbers one by one. They called from Brooke's phone next. She opened with her usual syrupy voice. "You being dramatic, or is this a permanent meltdown?" I hung up. Then silence again. A long, eerie calm. Until the storm finally hit and they made it very, very personal. It started with an envelope taped to the door of my building. No stamp. No return address. Just my name in permanent marker, underlined twice. Inside was a handwritten note from my dad. 2 pages. The first page was polite. He missed me. Mom wasn't sleeping well. Brooke was worried even though we both knew she wasn't. He said it wasn't fair to let one dinner ruin everything we built together as a family. The second page was different. It was a list. Groceries from the past year. Water bills. Power bills. A payment from 3 months ago labeled gas for car Alex. Every item had a number next to it. At the bottom, total owed, $11,970.34. Please pay by the 15th. No joke. My own father had sent me an invoice. I stood in the hallway holding the paper like it was on fire. I wanted to laugh, but nothing about it was funny, because I realized this wasn't just a guilt trip anymore. They really believed I owed them. I knew I had to stop hoping they'd come around. They weren't reaching out to apologize. They were preparing to collect. I didn't reply. I didn't even take the letter inside. I dropped it into the dumpster behind the building. A week later, the calls started again. This time, they weren't pretending. You've had it easy for too long, Alex. We gave you everything. You can't just walk out and act like we don't matter. Your mother is sick again and you're off playing bachelor in some dump. Then Brooke called me at 1 a.m. This is ridiculous. Just give them something. You lived there for years, rent-free. I told her flat out that I'd paid more than they ever asked for, that I'd kept records, receipts. She laughed. Oh, please. You think a couple grocery runs make up for the roof over your head? I hung up again. Blocked her too. But the next move they made was worse than any phone call. They stopped trying to guilt me and started trying to take what they thought was theirs. It was a Saturday when I got the text from my old neighbor, Mr. Donahue. He still lived across the street from my parents and always liked to chat when I was out washing the car or mowing the lawn. Solid guy. Quiet, retired, kept to himself. His message said, "Hey Alex, everything okay? Saw some folks hauling stuff out of your folks' garage. Thought maybe you were moving again?" That stopped me cold. I called him immediately. He told me that earlier that morning, a couple of guys with a moving van showed up. Brooke was there, directing them. They carried out a black futon, 2 large computer monitors, a plastic storage container, and some gym equipment, all stuff I'd left in the garage. Stuff that was mine. When I asked if they mentioned anything, he said Brooke told one of the guys. He doesn't live here anymore. It's all abandoned. We're just clearing out old junk. Old junk. The monitors alone were worth over $800. My home office setup gone. My signed baseball memorabilia from college gone. My weights and bench gone. All labeled junk. I drove straight over. They didn't expect to see me. I pulled up right as a guy was wheeling my guitar amp to the back of the van. I didn't yell. I just asked calmly, "Is that yours?" The guy looked at Brooke. She waved her hand like it was no big deal. "You weren't using it." Dad said it's fine. "We figured you didn't care." I walked right into the garage. The shelves had been stripped. Even the toolbox my grandfather left me was gone. I turned to my mom, who had come outside now, holding her coffee like this was just some casual Saturday cleanup. She wouldn't meet my eyes. I asked her directly, "Did you tell them to do this?" She looked at Brooke, then at me, then said, "We needed to make space. And honestly, Alex, after everything we did for you, this is the least you could do." That was it. Not an apology. Not an offer to return anything. Just this weird, warped logic that made my belongings suddenly part of some unspoken debt I apparently owed. I told them not to move another box. I told the movers they were handling stolen property. One of them immediately stepped away and said, "Hey man, we're just here for the job." I told everyone to leave. Then I got in my car, drove a block away, parked, and called the police. I sat in my car for a full minute before dialing. My hands weren't shaking. I wasn't angry in the way I expected to be. I felt cold, resigned. I told the dispatcher exactly what happened. That my family was removing and selling personal property from a home I no longer lived in without my permission. That I had receipts, serial numbers, photos. That I had a witness. I didn't exaggerate or overplay anything. I just told the truth. They sent an officer. When I pulled back up to the house, the van was still there. Brooke looked irritated, arms crossed, tapping her foot like I was the one who had interrupted her weekend. Richard, my dad, had come outside too. He stood with his hands on his hips, trying to play the authoritative homeowner like this was all a misunderstanding that could be fixed if I would just stop being so emotional. The police cruiser pulled in behind me. That changed the mood real fast. I let the officer speak first. I handed over my license, explained that I used to live here but had moved out, that the property being taken was mine. I showed photos from my phone, old shots of the garage, my desk, my name labeled on boxes, even Venmo screenshots where I had paid for most of the items myself. The officer turned to my family. My dad tried to stay calm. He doesn't even live here anymore. We assumed he didn't want that junk. And honestly, a lot of it was stored on our property. I don't think this needs to be escalated. The officer didn't bite. He asked one clear question. Did your son give you written or verbal permission to remove or sell any of these items? They all froze. My mom started to say something. I think it was going to be some vague, we thought he wouldn't mind, but the officer cut her off. That's not a yes. He stepped away to call it in. Meanwhile, Brooke turned to me with this disgusted little laugh. You're actually doing this? To your own family? And that's when I finally said it out loud. You stopped being my family the second you decided I was just a walking bill to cash out. The officer came back. He told them plainly, stop the removal immediately. The items still on the property were to stay put. The ones already taken would need to be returned or I could pursue charges. That's when my dad snapped. He exploded. Started yelling about entitlement, about how I was weak, ungrateful, about how they had sacrificed so much. The officer told him to lower his voice. He didn't. Susan tried to calm him, but it was too late. They put him in cuffs for disorderly conduct. Brooke screamed. My mom cried. The neighbors watched from behind windows. I stood on the lawn, silent. It wasn't revenge. It was survival. The cruiser drove off with my dad in the back seat. Not under arrest, just detained while things cooled down, they said. But the image of him shouting through the open window, face red, spit flying, yelling that I was a disgrace, that'll stay with me longer than it should. Brooke stood frozen near the moving van, arms locked across her chest, shaking her head like she couldn't believe any of this was real. My mom didn't say a word. She just went back inside. And that silence? That hit harder than the yelling. I stayed behind with the officer. He helped me inventory what was still there. We noted what had already been loaded and what might have already been sold or tossed. He told me I had grounds for a theft report and could press charges. I hesitated. It still felt wrong calling the police on the people who raised me. But at the same time, what they did was theft. Not an accident. Not miscommunication. They made a choice. And I was done pretending that choice didn't matter just because we shared DNA. I filed the report. The officer left me with a case number and a heavy warning. If they tried to retaliate, call immediately. I drove back to my apartment, locked the door, and sat in the dark for an hour. No music. No TV. Just silence. It was like grief, but slower. Heavier. They weren't dead. But something was. That tiny, fragile hope I'd always carried, the one that said maybe one day they'll see me, it cracked. And for the first time, I let it fall. The next day, I changed every password I had. Bank accounts, email, cloud storage, even Netflix, everything. I didn't know what they had access to or what they thought they had the right to touch. And frankly, I wasn't going to wait around to find out. Then I went to the bank in person. I told the manager my situation. Walked him through everything. I asked them to flag any suspicious activity related to my name, especially withdrawals or new account attempts. He was sympathetic. Quiet. Told me I wasn't the first person to come in with a story like this. That part hurt more than I expected. When I got home, I opened my old laptop, the one I'd used before moving back in, and pulled up every receipt, text thread, and timestamped email that proved the gear they took was mine. I backed it all up to a drive. I made a folder called in case they try again. Then I blocked every number linked to my family. Brooke, Mom, Dad, even the house landline. I deleted them from contacts, from old group chats, from everything. No drama. No announcement. Just gone. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't cry. It was like disinfecting a wound. Necessary. Clinical. But then, 5 days later, an email came in. The subject line was blank. The sender? My mom. It just said, "Please don't do this." He didn't mean to yell. Brooke was emotional. I was scared. You know, we've been under a lot of pressure. We only wanted a little help. That's all. We're still your family. No apology. No ownership. Just emotional bait. I didn't reply. I printed it, filed it with the report, and shut the laptop. This wasn't going to end because they suddenly understood. It would end because I stopped letting them write the rules. I made an appointment with a lawyer 2 days after that email. He was referred to me by a coworker who had dealt with a messy estate case. Older guy, smart, didn't flinch when I laid out the situation. I told him everything: the dinner, the move, the invoice, the stolen property, the police call, even the emotional games afterward. He listened, took notes, then looked me dead in the eye and said, "You're not the first to come in here thinking guilt is a legal argument. It's not. Facts are. We filed a formal theft complaint against Brooke and my father. The value of the items met the threshold for felony theft in Colorado. The lawyer drafted a cease and desist letter sent directly to their address, legally notifying them that any further harassment, contact, or attempts to access my property would be met with civil and criminal action. He also recommended I file for a protective order if they continued pushing. I felt like I was floating through all of it, like it was happening to someone else. Part of me kept thinking they'd stop. That someone, anyone, would snap out of it and call to say we went too far. But no. Instead, 2 days after they received the letter, Brooke posted on Instagram. It was a photo of her and my mom at brunch, clinking glasses. Caption: "Family sticks together even when some people walk away." I didn't comment. I didn't respond. But I did screenshot it. Because in this version of the story they were telling, I was the villain. And they were victims of a cold, ungrateful son. I could feel the narrative slipping out of my control. So I decided something right then. If they were going to paint me as the villain, I might as well stop trying to be the hero. I think the moment it fully broke, the last thread, the last illusion, was when I heard from Aunt Marlene. She's my mom's older sister. We aren't close, but we've always been cordial. She called me out of the blue, left a voicemail saying she just wanted to check in because she heard I was going through something. When I called her back, she didn't waste time. She asked if it was true. If I really called the police on my parents. If I really took legal action over a couple boxes of old junk. Her voice wasn't cruel, but it was soaked in that same condescending disbelief I'd heard my whole life. I told her everything. From COVID to the invoice. The theft. The screaming. The lies. She got quiet for a while. Then she sighed and said, "Families go through things, Alex. But this feels like you lit the house on fire just to prove a point." I didn't argue. I just said, "No. I left the house. They set fire to what I left behind. We haven't spoken since." And that's when it really hit me. I hadn't just left the house. I'd left the system. The image. The performance. The idea that keeping the peace is more important than living in truth. That dinner, that moment my dad asked, "When are you going to start your own family?" That wasn't just a throwaway jab. It was the last warning shot. The final sign that I'd never really been part of theirs. Not as a person. Not as a son. Just as an extension of their control. When I stopped playing my role, the whole play collapsed. And what's left now? Silence. No more voicemails. No more letters. No more fake concern. Just space. And honestly, for the first time in years, I can finally breathe. 3 weeks passed. No calls. No police follow-ups. No mysterious van pulling up outside my apartment. For a while, I thought maybe finally it was over. Then I got a letter. It wasn't handwritten this time. It was printed, formal-looking, sent certified mail. From a local debt collection firm. The amount? $11,970.34. I knew that number. It was the exact total from the invoice my dad had written, the one he taped to my apartment door weeks earlier. The one I threw in the trash. They'd turned it into an official family loan. I went cold. I called the number listed. The guy on the other end was polite enough until I asked who the creditor was. He said Richard Carter. My father. He'd actually gone to a collections agency and claimed I owed him money. For groceries. For utilities. For living in my own childhood home during a global pandemic. I told the rep this was fraud. He told me to dispute it formally. So I did. I sent them my own documentation, proof of my payments, bank transfers, emails, screenshots of Venmo notes labeled groceries, power bill, mom's meds. And then I did something I never thought I'd do. I emailed my father. Not to negotiate. Not to plead. Just to say this. You filed a false debt in my name. You tried to sell my property. You humiliated me, weaponized our history, and spun it into entitlement. Don't ever contact me again. I signed it. Your former son, Alex. He never replied. But that wasn't the end. Because 2 weeks later, I got another notice, this time from a small claims court. He was suing me. The envelope was thick. It smelled like ink and paper and bitterness. Inside was a summons. My father, Richard Carter, was officially suing me for nearly $12,000 in back support and damages. Damages. That word clung to me all night. Damages for what? For walking away? For not playing scapegoat anymore? The suit was filled with self-righteous language. It painted me as an ungrateful adult child who had freeloaded for years, caused emotional harm, and cost the family money through reckless abandonment. He even included screenshots of Brooke's Instagram caption as some twisted form of moral proof. I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I just felt numb. I forwarded everything to my lawyer. He read through the whole complaint and said one thing. This is smoke. He's not expecting to win. He's expecting to scare you. He was right. Because days later, I got a call from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. It was my mom. Her voice was tired. Shaky. She asked if we could meet. Said it didn't have to be public. She just wanted to talk, not about money, not about court, just us. I didn't answer. Instead, I pulled up the audio file, saved it, and sent it straight to my lawyer. He called me an hour later and asked a simple question. Do you want peace? Or do you want precedent? I asked what he meant. He said if I dropped everything, didn't pursue charges, didn't contest the debt in court, it would all go away. They'd back off. Settle. But if I fought it? If I saw this through? They'd be held accountable. On record. I looked around my tiny apartment. At the boxes still unpacked. At the echo of empty space where my guitar, my monitors, my tools used to be. And I realized I didn't need peace. I needed closure. I told him. Let's go to court. Court was scheduled for a Thursday morning. It wasn't a big courtroom, just a few pew-like benches, a judge's desk, a few clerks quietly organizing folders. But it might as well have been a stadium with how loud my heart was pounding. They were already there when I arrived. My father wore a pressed suit, tie perfectly knotted. He looked like he was going in for a job interview. Brooke sat behind him in a cream blazer, staring at her phone. My mother wasn't there. I didn't say a word to them. I walked past, took my seat next to my attorney, and opened the folder I had spent weeks building. Receipts, bank statements, emails, photos, texts, police report, the cease and desist letter, the voicemail from my mom, even Brooke's Instagram caption, all lined up in neat chronological order. The judge came in. The hearing started. My father spoke first. He gave a calm, confident speech about how much they had supported me over the years, how I had promised to contribute and then vanished, how I left them in debt and distress. He called me selfish, directionless, said I'd abandoned family responsibilities. The judge listened. Then it was my turn. I didn't say much. I let the documents speak. The judge flipped through everything, looked at me, looked at my father, looked at the police report, and then he said something I'll never forget. You're asking the court to enforce an informal family arrangement based on undocumented expectations. Meanwhile, the defendant has shown consistent financial contribution, documented payments, and evidence of harassment. This is not a legal debt. It's a personal grievance dressed as litigation. Case dismissed. No yelling. No drama. Just those 2 words, case dismissed. My father didn't look at me. He stood up and walked out without collecting his paperwork. Brooke gave me a look like I had spat in her face, then followed him. I sat there for a while, long after the room had emptied. I had one. But it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a funeral. A week after court, I got a letter from their lawyer. It was short. Cold. My parents would not be appealing the case. They considered the matter closed. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just a quiet retreat, like the whole thing had never happened. I thought that would be it. But then on a random Tuesday night, I got a text from an unknown number. Just one sentence. Hope you're happy now. No name. But I knew it was Brooke. I didn't respond. Instead, I blocked the number, deleted the message, and went back to my dinner. Because by then I had finally learned the difference between silence that's peaceful and silence that's weaponized. The next morning, I started the process of changing my legal address and setting up a mail forwarding service. I didn't want anything coming from their house again, not mail, not memories, not guilt. I took down the last framed photo of us from my bookshelf. It was an old family Christmas picture. Me and Brooke sitting on the floor in pajamas. Dad behind us with his arm around Mom. All of us smiling. I stared at it for a moment, then flipped it over and taped a note to the back. This version of us never really existed. Then I put it in a box, sealed it, and placed it in the back of my closet. I wasn't going to destroy it, but I wasn't going to lie to myself with it anymore either. I was done being a placeholder in someone else's idea of family. It's been 5 months now. No calls. No letters. No more surprise lawsuits. Just quiet. Some nights I still flinch when my phone buzzes, half expecting a new number, another guilt trip. But it's usually just work or a friend or someone asking if I want to grab coffee. I say yes more now. I joined a gym near my apartment. Started going after work. Nothing fancy, just routine. But it feels good to move. To be in a place where no one knows my last name. I replaced some of the things they sold, not because I needed them back, but because I wanted to choose them again. I bought a second-hand guitar, even though I hadn't played in over a year. I put together a new desk setup, nothing flashy, just functional. Just mine. And last weekend I hosted 3 friends for dinner. I cooked. Real food. Set the table. No one raised their voice. No one demanded anything. No one asked why I didn't call more or why I hadn't started a family yet. We just ate. Laughed. Existed. And I realized that was all I ever wanted, to exist without explanation. I don't know if they talk about me now. If my name comes up at holidays or if they just pretend I never existed. I don't really care. I don't hate them. I don't even think about revenge anymore. I just think about peace. About how long it took me to stop apologizing for walking away from people who never saw me unless they needed something. If you're reading this because you're in a similar place, stuck between guilt and clarity, between obligation and peace, I want to say something simple. You are not selfish for protecting yourself. You are not cruel for drawing a boundary your family refuses to respect. You don't owe anyone your silence just because they share your blood. I spent years being the good son, the reliable one, the quiet one, the one who paid without being asked, who fixed things without recognition, who stayed when everyone else left. And in the end, that version of me wasn't loved, he was used. Walking away wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't some mic drop moment. It was the quiet decision to stop handing matches to people who kept burning me. So here's my last word on all of this. I didn't start my own family in the way my father meant. But I did start something. A life that's mine. A life built on mutual respect, not unspoken debts. A life that doesn't ask me to shrink just to keep someone else comfortable. And that to me is the only family worth building. Alex Carter, but not the one they thought they raised.